1912, the unsinkable Titanic disappears beneath the frigid waters of the North Atlantic.
When you call it unsinkable, it is as if you are tempting the gods.
1985, after years of searching, explorers discover the wreck, broken in 2 sections.
How she broke her back is still under investigation.
2006, a new expedition uncovers missing pieces and surprising new evidence. Evidence that may forever change what we know about Titanic's final moments.
You would almost think that the story has been told.
There are things on Titanic that are not understood.
The physical ship on the bottom still has a lot to tell us.
That is the most significant Titanic footage I've ever seen in my life.
Oh my God, unbelievable.
August 2005. From the easternmost point of Canada, a unique expedition is getting underway. This Russian scientific research vessel, the Keldysh, is one of the few ships in the world equipped to explore a region as dangerous and inaccessible as outer space, the ocean depths. 2.5 miles down. The Keldish's destination, 360 miles to the southeast, looks just like anywhere else in mid-ocean. But miles below lie the remains of an object that has excited the popular imagination for nearly a century.
Titanic. The most well-known shipwreck in the world. This is an imposing icon for somebody that's interested in shipwrecks. This is the single place to be.
It's not the deepest shipwreck. It isn't the shipwreck that had caused the greatest loss of life. But yet, it stays in the public consciousness. Everyone knows of Titanic.
Before she sails, Titanic is the stuff of legend. Huge, opulent, proven technology, described as practically unsinkable. When she does sink, Titanic becomes mythic. A tragic metaphor for hubris and the terrible arithmetic of survival. It's hard to imagine that night without wondering, how would I have acted?
These people were facing moral choices about whether they themselves would live or die, or whether someone else would die in their place. These were agonizing decisions, and I think when we think about the Titanic, we try on those decisions for size. We wonder how we would measure up in that kind of extreme moral dilemma.
Bob Ballard's successes and a penchant for promoting them have provoked respect and jealousy.
When the wreck is located in 1985, Titanic's legend only grows further, unleashing a flood of books, feature films, television documentaries.
When they displayed these artifacts, they made $1 million.
Now, more than 90 years after the sinking, and over 20 years since the discovery, is there anything new to be learned about Titanic?
perhaps we're going to find pieces of the double hull, and maybe this got peeled
A Pennsylvania lawyer named David Concannon thinks so.
contributed massively to the sinking, more than 12 square.
In the summer of 2000, while exploring the wreck in a Russian submersible, Concannon and his dive partner made what he believes was a significant find.
Anatoly Segalevich, the head of the expedition for the Russians, and Michael Harris and myself found what we believe are sections of the hull, long sections as if a potato had been peeled back, ribbons of steel, far, 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 far south of the known area of the wreck site.
The generally accepted theory of Titanic's sinking is that she suffered damage along her side.
What's interesting about this drawing of the bottom cutting is that
Concannon believes what he and his dive partner discovered could prove that there was additional damage to her bottom. But there's a problem.
we were firing off hundreds of still photographs, and unfortunately, when we came to the surface, we discovered that the film was not advancing in the camera.
So now, in August 2005, this expedition is setting out to relocate and document what David Concannon saw 5 years ago.
This is a very critical photograph.
Leading the investigation are John Chatterton and Richie Kohler,
You can clearly see
technical divers and experts in exploring shipwrecks. Their work has been the subject of the best-selling book, Shadow Divers.
Well, what about the complexity?
With the attention that has been given to Titanic, you would almost think that the story has been told, but in fact, it hasn't. The dive itself is so complex, difficult, and reliant on technology that every single dive only gets so much information.
Ralph, what are our chances of finding? There are things down there on Titanic that have still not been seen. There are things on Titanic that are not understood.
To help them, Chatterton and Kohler have assembled a unique team.
Just like we did the imagery of the double bottom.
Bill Lang, underwater imaging expert from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Simon Mills, specialist in the Olympic class of ocean liner. Ralph White, master cinematographer, veteran of over 30 dives to the wreck. Robert Bloomberg, U.S. State Department, an expert on international maritime law who's working to preserve Titanic. And Roger Long, naval architect.
Inference has gotten piled on inference until it's become fact and build up this whole myth of the sinking. Calling it a myth doesn't mean that it's wrong. That in fact could be the story. But it just means that it really hasn't been proven in the kind of rigorous way that you would really want to build history around.
The ship that is the focus of this expedition begins taking shape in 1909 in Belfast, Ireland. But Titanic's real roots lie in America, the land of opportunity.
Immigrants trying to seek a new life in the United States. Millions of people traveled across that stretch of water, and it was because of this traffic that the great liners were built. The bigger the ship, the more immigrants that they could carry.
Without those vast numbers, those ships would never have been constructed. You have to think of them as the 747s of their day. These are giant people carriers. Once you've got them full of third-class passengers, the second and the first class are pure profit.
Among the British companies competing for the Atlantic traffic, White Star and Cunard. Cunard's ships are faster, but White Star has a strategy to attract immigrants.
White Star were very clever the way they operated. Even a third-class passenger was treated with the utmost respect. You ate at a table with linen on it, a knife and a fork and a spoon. The food was brought to you. You had a menu card. So there you have your menu. You turn the card over and it's a postcard, because they knew that every one of those passengers would tell their family and their friends back in the old country that they should travel by White Star.
In 1908, White Star orders 2 new people carriers, with an option for a third: Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. March 31st, 1909. Construction of Titanic begins. It is 3 years until her first voyage. Aboard the Keldysh, an hour after departure.
This expedition, and they're just looking forward.
As the team starts their first formal meeting with the Russians, everyone knows the key player is the scientist in charge of the Mir submersibles, Dr. Anatoly Segalevich.
I would like to say welcome on board our ship. I hope this quite short operation...
Anatoly's greeting is polite, but he has bad news. A storm in the North Atlantic is gaining strength and heading for the wreck site. There's no time to spare.
And I think that we have 3 double dives. I think that we will do it during...
Only 3 dives. The team had been counting on more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Barely an hour after departing, the odds against success have just increased. Day 2 of the expedition, nearly halfway to the wreck of Titanic. While Russian technicians prepare the Mir submersibles, the History Channel team reviews the dive plan.
A portion of the double bottom.
What I hope is going to happen when we get down to this newer area tomorrow is that we're going to see some sections of the hull, and I really want to know where they came from. We are here to try and look in a new area, because what I believe is in this area is evidence that could change the commonly held beliefs about the sinking of the Titanic and what actually happened on the night of April 14th, 1912.
5 years ago, David Concannon sighted a piece of steel that he believes is part of Titanic's bottom hull, torn off by the iceberg.
David believes that there was more to the sinking of this ship than just the damage along the starboard side. He passionately believes the ship also hit something on the bottom side.
Is it possible Titanic did not just sideswipe the iceberg, but also ran over it, damaging her bottom?
Well, think of them as planks. The tops of the sides.
It's a scenario known as the grounding theory.
The icebergs tend to, as the top melts, they tend to have these very long projections. And that's another thing that causes me to lean towards a grounding theory. It would be very surprising if there wasn't something under that iceberg for them to ground on and to damage the bottom. If there was any inner bottom damage at all, then everything that we've known and believed about the collision is wrong.
So our goal is to somehow, some way, get back to this location where David Concannon dove in the year 2000, document it with film and video, and then see if we can link that to the rest of the shipwreck.
To do that, the team, led by wreck divers John Chatterton and Richie Kohler, will need state-of-the-art technology, the Mir submersibles. Dr. Anatoly Segalevich, in charge of the Mirs, gives them an orientation.
Lighting actually on the boom. February we were in
Built in 1987 for the Russian Academy of Sciences, the Mirs can dive 20,000 feet, almost 4 miles. 25 feet long, 12 feet wide, the Mirs carry power and hydraulic equipment, thrusters for maneuvering, remote manipulator arms, and high-definition cameras in watertight housings. Inside, a pilot and 2 observers, plus gear for navigation, life support, temperature monitoring, and a few low-tech accessories.
Here we usually put some pee bottles.
That hasn't changed much over the years.
Every inch of wall space is covered with the tools that we're going to need to get the job done down there.
Everything is very utilitarian. Everything serves a purpose. There's nothing that's really for creature comfort.
In less than 24 hours, John and Richie will be 2.5 miles down, face to face with Titanic. As Titanic's design is taking shape, White Star plans plenty of luxury to attract passengers. But they're not ignoring safety.
Titanic was as safe as any other vessel in the world in 1912. The watertight bulkheads were of the most modern and certainly of the highest quality. Everything about that ship was done to first-class specifications.
Titanic is designed with 16 watertight compartments, plus a double bottom.
She was described as a 2-compartment ship, which meant if any 2 of the compartments were flooded, she could stay afloat. And in fact, if she was flooded in 3 or even 4 compartments, she could stay afloat.
The hope is that even if she starts flooding, she can function as her own lifeboat, remaining safely afloat long enough for help to arrive. In June 1911, both a Belfast newspaper and Shipbuilder magazine, a trade journal, described Titanic as practically unsinkable. Aboard the Keldysh, just before the first dive, Anatoly starts his morning briefing.
Okay, good morning, доброе утро. We open new page in our diving on Titanic. Real history page. Историческую страничку открываем сегодня.
Anatoly will take John and David in Mir 1 to Titanic's stern, then head south to search for the ribbons of steel Concannon saw in 2000. Jenya will pilot Mir 2. He will start at the bow, carrying Richie and Ralph. Their objective? Document the wreck's deterioration, then explore the debris field.
Okay, this is practically all. Weather very rough, but I think that you will be lucky.
Everything is riding on these dives. If they can't find and photograph Concannon's ribbons of steel, the experts will have nothing to analyze, and the expedition will have failed. Day 3 on the Keldysh. The first dive is beginning. John and Richie have decades of experience diving wrecks on scuba and rebreathers. But this History Channel expedition is their first dive in a submersible, and their first to Titanic.
I got butterflies in my stomach.
There's a lot of things rolling through my head. I'm a wreck diver. I've identified myself as a shipwreck diver and explorer since I'm 15 years old.
I am working very hard at keeping a surface of professionalism and calm. But you're talking about a guy that has been diving shipwrecks for most of his adult life. That is the thing that I'm truly passionate about. And all we want to see is the water splashing over the ports.
Here we go. Now we got our feet wet. That's it, baby. We've just splashed down and we're right below the surface.
Descending at roughly 100 feet per minute, it doesn't take long to pass the deepest Richie and John have ever been. 750 meters. 800. 850. It will take the Mears over 2 hours to reach the bottom. Waiting there, 2.5 miles down, Titanic. Almost immediately after she sinks, the wreck of Titanic begins inspiring curiosity and fantasy.
Finding the Titanic has been many people's dream. 2.5 miles down in the middle of the Atlantic, it's an extraordinary technological achievement. But yeah, people dream.
For decades, the dream remains a fantasy. Then, in 1985, a joint French-American expedition, led by Jean-Louis Michel and Robert Ballard, sets out to do the impossible. In July, the search begins.
A lot of this area is flat, muddy bottom. So what we were experiencing were days upon days of seeing nothing but mud. So people would get very excited if they saw a rock or a fish.
We had been at sea 56 days. Morale was low, everybody was pretty disappointed. And finally, September 1st, 1:45 in the morning, local Atlantic time, we started coming across debris.
Objects. We saw a pipe, and then eventually we started to see more and more debris.
Bed springs, plates, a lot of coal.
We knew we were coming into something, but we didn't know it was the wreck of the Titanic.
More stuff coming.
And then finally, this huge single-sided boiler with the 3 unique stoking ports.
Ooh. God, the boiler! Yes, yes. Fantastic! All right!
We had a picture of a boiler sitting in a warehouse before the Titanic was built.
Everybody kind of looked to see if it was the same boiler.
And it matched perfectly.
That's the Titanic boiler! And there was kind of a yes, 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 you know?
September 1st, 1985. After 73 years, Titanic has been found. Then, when they look closely, another find, quite unexpected. Titanic had split in half. Exactly when and how the ship broke apart has never been definitively established. But if there was, in fact, grounding damage to Titanic's double bottom, perhaps that damage could shed light on the breakup.
That breakup is sort of a Pandora's box. But when you add the possibility of grounding damage to the bottom of the ship, a lot of these loose ends and contradictions and unknown things start to fall into place.
That's why this expedition is so interested in locating pieces of Titanic's double bottom. 2 hours after splashing in, Mir 2 approaches the wreck. On this dive, Richie and Ralph's objective is to survey and photograph the bow section in order to document its recent deterioration.
Oh, wow.
But first, it's impossible for Richie not to experience the magnitude of this moment.
Oh my God. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Look at that. Oh, oh man. Oh wow. And is that's one of the cranes for picking up the anchors, correct?
Yeah, that's it right there.
Oh my God.
Take a look.
Look at that. Look at that.
The wreck side of Titanic occupies more than a square mile. The bow and stern sections are about 800 meters apart. The bow pointing north, the stern south. The bow, though damaged and deteriorating, still reveals recognizable features. The port side anchor, weighing over 7 tons. All around and over it, and covering the hull, hanging down, are rusticles, icicle-like secretions, the waste product of bacteria that eat iron oxide. Anchor chain. Each link weighed 150 pounds. The forward cargo hold, its hatch cover long gone. The base of the forward mast, originally towering over the ship, the giant mast apparently toppled backwards on the way to the bottom. Moving up the mast, the hatchway for the lookouts. After climbing up through the mast, they would emerge here to stand watch in the crow's nest, now gone. From this spot, lookout Fred Fleet saw the iceberg. Moving up the superstructure, memorial plaques left by visitors litter the bridge. Behind them, the remnants of the ship's wheel. The wood is long gone, but the bronze housing and gears of the telemotor remain. Behind the bridge, the officers' quarters. Captain Smith's cabin and his bathtub. As Richie, Ralph, and Jenya continue inspecting the bow, a half-mile away, Mir 1 is heading south, searching for David Concannon's ribbons of steel.
I remember some of these big bowls. We saw a big cooking pot.
Everything this expedition is hoping to accomplish depends on their success. Day 3 of the History Channel expedition to Titanic, dive number 1. John, David, and Anatoly in Mir 1 are 800 meters south of the bow, approaching the stern. If Titanic's bow section is relatively intact, the stern is almost unrecognizable. a scene of utter devastation. Only a few features are still intact. At the edge of the break, clearly visible, the double bottom. Still bolted to the tank top, a massive engine, as tall as a 5-story building. The huge propellers. On the blade of one, number 401, the yard number assigned to Titanic by her builder, Harland and Wolff. The uppermost deck of the stern, called the poop deck, is peeled back like a tin can. Alongside it, shredded remnants of the top edge of Titanic's side. Portholes and railing still visible. Completely gone is the docking bridge, where an officer would have stood to guide Titanic's stern in toward the pier as she arrived in New York. That arrival, scheduled for April 17, 1912, is intended to be the final success in the long career of Titanic's captain, Edward J. Smith, who's due to retire after this trip. Smith is a 25-year veteran of White Star. Interviewed in 1907, he expresses sublime confidence in the new vessels he is now commanding and those building them.
I cannot imagine any condition which would cause a ship to founder. I cannot conceive of any vital disaster happening to this vessel. Modern shipbuilding has gone beyond that.
There had never been, certainly in Smith's lifetime, a serious incident involving a large passenger vessel resulting in serious loss of life. So I think he was lulled into a false sense of security.
2,200 people are on board, a crew of 900 and 1,300 passengers. Wallace Hartley is a violinist who leads the ship's band. But to avoid paying musicians union scale, White Star lists them as second-class passengers. In third class, or steerage, 710 passengers, many of them immigrants. 29-year-old Alma Paulson from Sweden is moving to Chicago. Her husband's gone ahead to find work. Traveling alone with 4 kids, she's got her hands full. The Dean family, Mr. and Mrs., 2-year-old Bertie and 9-month-old Milvina, are moving to Kansas.
We went third class, or steerage, because my father's heard from relations in Kansas telling him how much more opportunity there would be in America. And so he thought immediately we would go there.
Not all immigrants on Titanic are poor. 16-year-old Edith Brown and her parents are in second class. Her father, Thomas Brown, is moving the family to Seattle.
He shopped around and he worked it out that if he could wind his affairs up by around about the end of January or February 1912, they could make it to join that brand new ship that everyone was talking about, the Titanic. And they did.
April 10th, 12 noon. Titanic departs Southampton, England. Following 2 days of sunny skies and calm seas, on Friday, April 12th, a message from another ship. Ice ahead. Sunday morning, April 14th. 2 more reports of ice. The ice these ships are seeing began as snow in Greenland 10,000 years earlier. Gradually piling up a mile thick, over centuries the snow compresses into glacier ice. Ever so slowly, it inches its way down to the sea and breaks off.
Once it falls into the ocean, the ice is called an iceberg. They circulate around Baffin Bay for a while, maybe a few years. Then they come down the Labrador Current, and the Labrador Current brings them right offshore here, right off Newfoundland.
Right off Newfoundland, Iceberg Alley. Once it reaches here, the 10,000-year-old ice has only weeks to live. By evening, Sunday, April 14th, Titanic has received a half-dozen ice warnings. Put together, they indicate an enormous belt of ice stretching for miles. In a month, it might be gone. But this April night, it lies right across her path. In Mere 1, John, David, and Anatoly are well south of the stern, searching for the debris David Concannon sighted in 2000. If they find it, it may prove Titanic suffered previously unknown grounding damage.
Mere 1, this is Mere 2.
From Mere 2, an anxious Richie checks in.
You know I'm dying to hear. Did you find the ribbon of steel?
Day 3 of the History Channel expedition, midway through the first dive to Titanic. In Mere 1, John, Anatoly, and David Concannon are well south of the wreck, searching for the ribbons of steel Concannon saw in the year 2000.
Something to the east.
If they find this debris, and if it is what Concannon thinks it is, it could prove that Titanic not only sideswiped the iceberg, but also ran over part of it, damaging her bottom.
I'm optimistic that they're going to find something. But the thing that bothered me about this is that David was not able to give us the one thing that I wanted to see, and that was some kind of photographic proof.
1 hour into the search, roughly 600 meters south of the stern.
Now,
We are far away from the wreck.
we're right where we should be, actually.
Concannon recognizes a familiar rise on the bottom.
And there's a hill. There's a hill, and there's dishes on the hill.
You've got all kinds of stuff. This is a bona fide debris field.
Then, they spot a piece of steel.
Yeah. I've got some steel over here. What's this?
Yeah, piece of steel. This is something.
Yeah, there's a
There,
big piece
baby.
of steel. Woo!
Yeah, right.
I was not crazy. This is the big boy. This is what I was thinking.
But something isn't right. Concannon thinks it's the same location. There is a piece of debris, but it looks nothing like ribbons of steel.
Right where we said it was, but what is it? doesn't look to me like double bottom, but that's
it's a boxed out beam of some sort.
It becomes clear. Whatever this debris is, it's not giant ribbons of steel. And definitely not part of Titanic's double bottom hull.
It looks like where we were before, but we really don't know. Now, this doesn't make any sense.
In Mir 2, Richie is anxious for an update.
Mir 1, this is Mir 2. John? Yeah, John, I read you loud and clear. You know I'm dying to hear. Did you find the ribbon of steel? Negative. 10-4 on that. 10-4 copy negative.
Perhaps Concannon misjudged what he saw in 2000. Or perhaps this isn't the location.
You see it out there, John? It's near the edge of the hill. We got down to that area. The hill was there, the metal was there, the ribbons of steel that I saw before we missed, which is they weren't where I thought they were, or we missed them entirely.
Some people would say that not finding the ribbons of steel would be a bust. I don't look at it that way. I think that anytime you look outside the box, you expand the search, you're going to have to look at a lot of mud bottom, you're going to have to look at a lot of empty areas to find stuff.
Nevertheless, now they've only got 2 dives left to find what they came for. The pressure is on. By Sunday, April 14th, Titanic is more than halfway to New York. In second class, David Haseman's mother, 16-year-old Edith Brown, is having the time of her life.
She was thrilled to bits. They shopped around and bought her all these new dresses and hats and things, and she was hoping there was going to be dancing on board and what have you. And she was looking forward to it.
Even third-class passengers, like Melvina Dean's mother, are finding White Star's hospitality impeccable.
Oh, she seemed to be quite happy with it. She thought the accommodation was quite good. And I remember her saying there was a band also, a Welsh band playing on third class, presumably, which was awfully nice.
Sunday afternoon, the weather turns suddenly cold. After receiving a half-dozen ice warnings, Captain Smith moves his course 10 miles further south. But he doesn't post extra lookouts, nor does he slow down.
All North Atlantic officers were taught to keep up the pace, keep to the schedule, and that was standard. Captain Smith really wasn't doing anything different that night. I think he just thought, as most of his officers thought, that if there is any danger ahead, we will see it in time and we will be able to get around it.
It's a time-honored strategy for coping with ice, and it works, usually. But it depends completely on one essential factor: visibility.
When you see an iceberg in a nice blue sky day just off the coast, they're really massive. They're quite spectacular, and it's hard to imagine how you could miss such a thing.
Even at night, an iceberg will normally show up because of wave action around its base. But Sunday, April 14th, 1912 is a most unusual night. There's no moon, and the sea is strangely, absolutely flat calm.
In a calm night, there'd be no wave action, and it would be extremely difficult to see until you were almost on top of it.
11:40 p.m. Lookout Fred Fleet sees something blacker than night, right in Titanic's path. Day 3 on the Keldysh. The first dive is ending. Once the hatches are open and the divers are out, there's only a brief moment for photos and quick greetings before it's on to more pressing business.
Diving in with a veteran. Only way to do it. I mean, we really got the full tour.
I'm sorry to say, though, that Titanic has deteriorated a lot. Noticeably so. And now you'll excuse us, we have an appointment with Les Toilettes.
After taking care of business, the team debriefs. Everyone wants to hear what happened with the ribbons of steel.
Good job of documenting it. It didn't look like double bottom to me. It looked like a box beam, but I couldn't nail it down. A good portion of it is buried. But
the failure to find Concannon's ribbons of steel is a major disappointment.
continue.
But continuing further south, John reports they did find an intriguing trail of debris.
It seemed to us like a relatively narrow corridor of debris, specifically coal. It literally is a trail that leads you right to the stern of the wreck.
It's like a runway.
A narrow trail, mostly coal, extending nearly a mile south of the stern.
Dribbling out of the ship, or was it pouring out of the
It seems to imply Titanic may have traveled a good distance with a sizable hole in her.
This thing had to be opened from the bottom, thousands of feet away.
Yes, and because of the heavy objects that came out that we know would have gone virtually straight down, those are all up near the bow and the stern. So this is a long distance for her to have floated with a hole in her.
No, I think what I'd like to do is to sort of give an idea of the drift of the coal. But
The trail of coal is interesting, but no one's sure of its significance.
We then quickly moved up onto the wreck.
When the talk turns to Richie and Ralph's dive, what they report is less confusing, yet more emotional.
And then came up and followed the main mast up right onto the bridge where we looked at the telemotor. From there we could actually see all of the, I'd call it pollution. I mean, everybody and their sister has to drop a plaque up there, and it detracts, I think, from the wreck site. The next most dramatic visual for me is to come onto the stern, because for me, that's where the human story of Titanic is. That's where people fought for their lives. It's a very emotional thing. Although that's not going to help us in our search, that is a moment. That's my moment on Titanic.
The first dive is over. They did find an interesting trail of coal. But whatever it means, it's not sections of Titanic's bottom. Not what they're looking for.
The question is, which is the forward end?
The next day, the team splits up.
At this point,
John, David, Simon, and Richie joined Mary Ann Morin from the Woods Hole lab to review high-definition video of dive number 1.
Simon, at this point, the realization is settling in that this isn't the bottom of the hull.
The only thing that I've seen that even remotely looks like this is the expansion joint.
You know, could be part of the expansion joint.
It's part of the stove.
Kitchen stove?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that would make sense.
While they're doing that, Roger Long and Ralph White will make a second dive in the mirror. Their objective? Examine the bilge keels, two narrow strips of steel running along part of the hull. If Titanic did suffer grounding damage, the starboard bilge keel would almost certainly be damaged as well. If this dive finds damage on the bilge keel, it will be strong evidence to support the grounding theory. Sunday, April 14th, 11:40 p.m. Lookout Fred Fleet sounds the alarm. Iceberg, right ahead. In third class, Milvina and Bertie Dean are asleep.
My mother and father heard a terrific noise. My father went up on deck to see what it was, came back and said apparently the ship had struck an iceberg, get the children out of bed and on deck immediately.
Trying to swerve around the iceberg, Titanic has sideswiped it, bumping along in a series of blows. Rivets give way, seams between plates open. The exact nature of the damage will never be known, but eyewitnesses are very clear.
There were two very long, detailed inquiries. People saw water coming in along the starboard side, and they were quite clearly able to work out what had gone wrong in that section of the ship.
But was that the only damage? Buried in the 1912 inquiries, there is other evidence which points to a mystery that has never been solved. An hour and 40 minutes after the collision, water is coming into boiler room number 4, not from the side, but from underneath, up through the floor. Could this mean there was bottom damage?
Now, boiler room number 4 was not damaged by the side damage from the iceberg. Therefore, that could indicate that there was additional damage beneath the double bottom.
Was Titanic's double bottom damaged as well? The mystery remains unsolved. But either way, she is already doomed. Few on board realize it, but Titanic has barely 2 hours to live. April 15th, 12 a.m. 20 minutes since the collision. Captain Smith has radio operators start sending distress calls and orders the lifeboats uncovered. In second class, 16-year-old Edith Brown and her parents have gone up on deck to see what's happening.
When they got up there, there was wisecracks. Hey, there's ice on the foredeck. People throwing ice at each other. Someone else said, well, perhaps we ought to go down and join in the fun. And another person said, well, I think it's all going to be cooled off soon. We can all go back to bed.
Down in third class, Melvina Dean's father is taking no chances.
He got us wrapped up in blankets and things, and with the help of a sailor, up on deck. That might have been quite hard because we were down the bottom. We had to get up on top. But we managed it anyhow.
Up in the first class lounge, Wallace Hartley and the musicians begin playing cheerful music to keep spirits up. 2,200 people are now facing a life and death emergency. Their survival is the responsibility of 59-year-old Captain Edward J. Smith.
Captain Smith, then as now, is God. Absolutely, completely in command. Every aspect of the control and operation of the ship, the behavior of the passengers, everything.
He faces considerable obstacles. First, the awful mathematics of the lifeboats. By law, Titanic is required to carry just 16. She actually has 20, but they'll only hold 1,200 people. 1,000 passengers have nowhere to go. Smith must organize crew and passengers, load 1,200 people into 20 boats, launch the boats, and do it all in 90 minutes. It's more than any one man could handle.
After the collision, there aren't all that many reports of Captain Smith. He's probably suffering a great deal from shock, but he was in a position where he should have been able to take command and give very succinct orders to his officers.
Confusion builds as lifeboats are loaded, then launched.
Because I was so small, I was in a sack, and my mother realized that she had me, but not my brother. So she had more to worry about. Obviously, my mother couldn't do anything in a lifeboat, stay where she was, trying to keep me warm. It was so bitterly cold.
There's no consistency. On the starboard side, First Officer Murdoch orders women and children into the boats first. But if no more are standing there, he allows men. To port, Second Officer Lightoller says women and children only.
Titanic was a floating microcosm of 1912 society. In that society, any of those men on the Titanic, they might not have given up their place to a woman, but they would have felt, in not doing so, that they were doing wrong.
My mother always said she's never seen her father look so sad. My grandmother kept shouting to him, "Go around the other side and find our lifeboat, Tom." But he never moved. As they lowered away, he just cupped his hands together and he said, "I'll see you in New York." Never took his eyes off him. Like many other men, he knew he wasn't going anywhere that night. And those were the last words they ever heard him say.
No one seems to realize the boats can be launched fully loaded. 12:45 a.m. The first boat, number 7, leaves, with 37 seats empty. Over the next 90 minutes, the tragedy multiplies. Number 3, 33 empty seats. Number 5, 28 empty. Number 6, 37 seats empty.
Whatever way you look at it, there are unnecessary deaths. Doesn't matter whether there weren't enough lifeboats on the Titanic to start with. Captain Smith allowed lifeboats to be launched from the Titanic that were not filled to its stated capacity. That is an absolute failure of duty.
By 1:30 a.m., the water has reached Titanic's name at the bow. Up in the wireless room, the radio messages are growing increasingly desperate. Aboard the Keldysh, day 4 of the History Channel expedition. The second dive, with Roger Long and Ralph White, is ending.
Congratulations. Thank you. So, how'd it go? How was it?
We actually got under and could see the curve of the bilge, and I don't see any sign of inner bottom damage. Now, we haven't seen all of it.
Roger and Ralph have seen no damage to the starboard bilge keel. No evidence to support the grounding theory.
Well, listen, let's get you a couple of minutes to catch your breath.
And there's more bad news. Tropical storm Irene has gotten stronger. It's now a hurricane and getting closer. The next day, the mirrors are down for maintenance.
This just sits in a U-turn.
The grounding theory, the original reason for this expedition, seems dead.
This really weights the balance against the bottom damage theory.
Now, where do we go from here?
Interspersed with heavy pieces of debris, but where do we
With only one dive left, Bill Lang suggests a new direction.
out there to do a thorough investigation?
There's a lot of heavy debris to the east of the stern. There's some large holes in the 85 and 86 survey in that area. I mean, big enough to hold some major pieces. So, I mean, even though that area was surveyed,
it's an area that hasn't been studied.
So there's potential for some.
When we look at the area east of the main body of wreckage, it was originally side scanned in 1985, 1986 by Woods Hole. But exactly what's out there, they're not sure.
There may be some chunks out there. There could be a big piece of inner bottom. There could be a big chunk of hull.
Spending the last dive on the rarely explored area to the east is a gamble. It could be a gold mine or a dead end.
We could go down there and completely waste an entire day with 2 mere submersibles. So, yeah, there is a significant amount of risk in doing what we're doing, but this is the way it works in exploration.
It's their last chance. The ultimate success or failure of the expedition is riding on this final dive. Day 6 of the History Channel expedition. The final dive to Titanic is beginning. In Mir 1, John and Richie. In Mir 2, filmmaker Kirk Wolfinger and U.S. State Department Representative Bob Bloomberg.
Thank you.
So far, looking south, they've found no evidence of bottom damage. Now they'll gamble and head east into an area that has rarely been explored.
I've been involved with many expeditions out to the Titanic, and what I feel really fortunate about being on this expedition is that this expedition is not just looking at making a documentary, but it's looking at trying to solve some questions.
We haven't been able to find it, but who knows, they might get lucky today and find that one little critical piece of evidence that will change the whole story of Titanic.
April 15th, 2:05 a.m. Only 2 lifeboats are left. 1,500 people remain on board. Alma Paulson and her children among them. Like many third-class passengers, by the time they reach the boat deck, there's nowhere to go.
By the time most of the lifeboats had been lowered, it was too late for the passengers from third class to reach them because they were so far down in the ship.
Wallace Hartley and the musicians are probably still playing. No one knows exactly when they stop. but their courage will come to symbolize the best of Titanic's crew this night. At 2:10 a.m., help is on the way. 50 miles to the southeast, the Cunard liner Carpathia has heard the distress calls and is racing to the scene. But 2 more hours will pass before she arrives. At 2:15 a.m. According to some witnesses, including Edith Brown, Titanic's stern rises higher. Terrible sounds begin.
Booming noises, thunderous noises, the smashing of glass, huge amounts of foam and spume coming up. All these screams and cries and so on. She and her mother turned their heads away. They couldn't handle it. It was just too much to endure.
In this final moment, a lasting controversy is born. Some claim the stern rises steeply and Titanic breaks apart. Others deny it. For 73 years, the breakup remains unconfirmed. And even today, the details are uncertain. Regardless, at 2:20 a.m., Titanic's stern slides beneath the waves. 1,500 people end up in the water.
The very few survivors that were actually pulled from the water just minutes after they had gone into the water remember it being like 1,000 knives being stuck into them.
Despite cries for help, almost none of the half-empty lifeboats go back to pull survivors from the water. Once the screams die away, over 700 people in the boats are left with nothing but cold and silence. Aboard the Keldysh, the navigators track the Mears on their final dive to Titanic. For the History Channel team, the waiting game continues.
Right now, there's nothing we can do. They're down there, they're looking around. We've given them as much information as we can give them. All we can do now is wait and hope that when they come back, they've got what we need.
7 meters. Okay, we're 3 feet off the bottom.
Right over here we got something.
Do you see all yet? Oh yeah, I see something now.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, look at that, huh?
Is that part of the bilge keel?
I don't know, John. I can't see out my port yet.
If it is bilge keel, this must be part of the bottom.
I think that is it. Yes, yes, yes.
We're looking at the bottom of the ship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unbelievable.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. That's double hull. That's double hull.
Oh, man, look at this. Wow.
We want to document this thing as well as we can.
It is bilge keel. The red paint still clearly visible. They are face to face with a piece of Titanic's bottom. But how far does it extend?
Is this a cross section with 2 bilge keels?
What are you saying? We're looking at the entire bottom?
Yeah.
The only way you can prove that right now is if we have him turn around and go back over the other side. Okay, yeah, so let's follow it around.
Let's follow it around.
If they follow the edge all the way around and find bilge keel on the other side, that means this piece is a complete cross-section, spanning the entire width of Titanic's hull, bilge keel to bilge keel.
Here's the keel. Oh my God, John, that's the keel. Yeah. This is the keel of Titanic. That's the center of the wreck. Oh yeah. Look at that. There it is.
The center keel, structural spine of the ship. They keep going.
Oh wow, John, maybe you are right.
This is a cross section.
Wait, it's coming into focus. And wait. And there's the other bilge keel.
We've got all the double hull in there.
Oh my gosh. This is the entire bottom of the ship. The entire bottom from port to starboard.
Yes.
It's an incredible piece of evidence. A huge, intact piece of Titanic's missing bottom. Ritchie reports their sighting to the Keldysh.
We've confirmed the presence of a bilge keel on both ends. This is an entire section of the bottom of Titanic.
I was going to come find you. They have found what appears to be a complete section of the inner bottom, upside down, with the paint still on it.
Show me where they found it.
And within the hour, remarkably, Mir 2 sights a second intact piece of double bottom, a few hundred yards from the first.
It really is amazing. First thing we hit is something Genya hasn't seen before.
On the final dive, they found what they were looking for. 2 pieces of Titanic's missing bottom. Now, the real work can begin.
You're looking at the turn of the hull. Yes.
Months of analysis back on land. The question is, what will this evidence reveal? The 8-day History Channel expedition to Titanic is over. Phase 2 now begins, trying to unlock the secrets hidden in the steel.
I would say when the ship sank, that piece.
For the next 4 months, the team splits up.
I got to disagree with you on both ends of the deal.
Bottom structure right now.
New members are added.
And I'm looking at the increased depth.
Working individually, conferring by phone and email, everyone struggles to analyze the pieces of double-bottom hull.
Was down in the mirror when we were actually looking at these.
That is totally awe-inspiring. That is the most significant piece of Titanic footage I've ever seen in my life.
In October, the first revelation emerges. Working from the underwater video, marine artist Ken Marshall creates architectural scale drawings of the pieces. The broken edges line up perfectly. These 2 hull sections were once one. Together, they account for almost 70 feet of Titanic's bottom, located just beneath and aft of the 3rd funnel, right where she broke apart. These pieces are the best forensic evidence engineers and marine architects have ever had to understand the breakup.
The one thing this expedition did very well was go down and record the edges so we can see exactly what the shape of the steel at the moment it separated. And we can see places where things were pushed together, places where things were bent. And if we can go back and fit all of those pieces together, we may be able to sort of run the movie in reverse and come up with a very good explanation of exactly how the ship came apart.
In December, the team gathers at Woods Hole to discuss and debate the meaning of the double-bottom pieces.
Nice to meet you. Nice to put a face to the emails.
And everything else.
It's what they've all been working toward. A chance to reach initial conclusions about the breakup of Titanic.
Hi. What we've been working on is taking the 1985 and 1986 data that was collected.
Bill Lang begins.
This is a zoomed-in window. The stern is sitting right about here.
He's been working to map the debris field because he thinks it contains clues to the timeline of the disaster.
Okay, you've got 60 feet of keel member in these two pieces, roughly.
Bill is convinced the location of the two double-bottom pieces far to the east marks the moment when the breakup began.
Well, I mean, I think this is number one, okay, because number one to me is where the ship broke up. To me, this is the primary debris field associated with the ship.
You're saying these two double bottom pieces were on their way to the bottom, while the bow and stern were still on the surface?
Yes. Yes. And that this point in time represents probably when the bow and stern started to separate, okay?
That means, that's X marks the spot. Right above that
is where the ship broke.
Titanic's final moment was.
Somewhere here the ship died when the keel broke, because these are the keel
But
sections.
regardless of whether this is the actual spot, what caused the breakup? When did it start? How did it progress? And how did it determine the fate of the passengers? Since the breakup was confirmed in 1985, most Titanic researchers have come to believe it began just before the final plunge. According to this theory, Titanic reached a high angle, over 30 degrees, and the weight of the unsupported stern caused the structure to fail, cracking from the top down. Though it had to be terrifying, passengers would have known that the end was near. The ship was starting down, and in moments, they would be in the water.
Well, when I first started reviewing the videos and the data that the History Channel expedition brought back, the only thing I could conclude was...
But to Roger Long, the expedition's findings suggest the timing of the breakup may have been different, and the angle shallower.
The steel doesn't lie. It doesn't protect reputations, it doesn't have false memories, it never forgets. And as we've looked at the steel, no one thing, but all these little indicators seem to point to the shallower angle. We all agree that the stern broke off because it was lifted, and the weight of the water and the weight of the stern working against each other, the ship was being bent like this. And when you bend a long structure like a ship or a girder, the top of it stretches and gets longer, and the bottom gets pushed together. So you've got tension at the top and compression at the bottom, and somewhere in the middle...
Roger believes if the stern snapped off at a high angle, the edges of the break would be pulled apart at the top and pushed together or compressed at the bottom. But the broken edges of the upper decks of Titanic's bow section don't seem just to have pulled apart. They're mangled and bent steeply downward. And the edges of the double bottom that should be crushed and compressed instead appear cleanly broken off.
If it broke from this high angle, everything up the top side should be quite clean and straight, and all of the chaos and the jumbling and the crunching together should be down at the bottom. And we see exactly the opposite. And furthermore, if it crashed off like in the movie, everything would have separated and we wouldn't have seen these evidence of all these pieces being mashed in on themselves and twisted and so forth. So the key point is that something interrupted the breakup.
Roger now thinks that the breakup began at a shallow angle, perhaps as little as 11 degrees. and progressed in 2 stages.
So what that means basically to me is that the inner bottom broke separately from the ship.
First, the upper structure fails, starts to crack. The crack stops at the double bottom, which is now all that's holding Titanic together. It starts to bend under the strain. Then the sides separate. The double bottom starts to fail. Tons of water pull the middle of the ship down, bending Titanic the other way. Upper decks are compressed and mangled together. The bow heads for the bottom. The stern is the last to sink. This scenario, the breakup starting at a shallower angle, suggests the 1,500 people still aboard may have been caught by surprise.
Ultimately, it's a very different human experience because this whole question of hope comes in. The people are on board a ship that appears to be not sinking very fast. And it was very reasonable at that point to believe that it might float for a considerably longer period of time. So if we accept that the breakup happened at this point, this early breakup, I think we come inescapably to the conclusion that the breakup was not something that just happened as the ship made her final plunge, but the breakup caused the final plunge. The breakup determined when the ship sank, and therefore the breakup determined whether a lot of people lived or died.
What you just stated there is backed up by personal testimony. The order of the launching of the lifeboats was very orderly. It appears that the crew had in mind that they had longer to get people off. They knew that the ship was going to sink, but that they might have more time than what it turned out to be. So
there's crew members who actually state they did not think the ship was going to sink. They thought it would settle to a certain point and then it would stop sinking. I think that's what everyone was expecting, was that she would float as her own lifeboat until the Carpathia got there, until rescue ships arrived.
Quite possibly could have overlooked this because people up here were concentrated on boats, people here were looking for
If Titanic had floated longer, the few hours of extra time crew members hoped for might have made all the difference.
And this is when Lighthauler, we believe, was washed off right about here, and he certainly wasn't looking at what was going on.
It's barely 2 hours after the sinking when Carpathia arrives. Sunrise reveals an enormous field of ice and floating bodies.
Mother said the worst she ever saw was in the morning. To see all these people drifting around their boat in an upright position with life jackets on, where the cold had been too much to sustain life. They were drifting all around the lifeboats. They were all frozen to death, all of them.
1,500 people have died. Carpathia retrieves roughly 700 survivors from the lifeboats, then heads for New York. When she arrives on April 18th, 10,000 people are waiting. A U.S. Senate investigation begins the next morning. In 3 weeks, a British inquiry will follow. Back at the wreck site, over the next weeks and months, hundreds of bodies are retrieved. On April 25th, Alma Paulson, the young mother from Sweden, is recovered. Another body located is bandleader Wallace Hartley. When he is laid to rest in England, thousands attend. The musicians' families receive tributes from all over the world. But from White Star's agent, they get only a bill. Money owed for lost uniforms. Many victims, like Melvina Dean's father, are never located.
He was an extremely handsome man, and I think he must have had a very, very nice personality. Some of the others, they found the bodies floating and that and all kind of thing, but he was never found.
After Titanic, passenger ships will carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board. And they will slow down in ice. But new safety regulations aren't the only legacy of the tragedy. Titanic was more than a ship. She was an idea, a symbol of pride and progress and human ingenuity.
There was still enormous faith in technology. Here we are in 1912, and it seems as if the peaceful evolution of technology is going to promise greater and greater things for mankind.
Today, the ship that was called Unsinkable is dissolving away. Time and the ocean are completing what the iceberg began.
Eventually, it will collapse upon itself. There will still be pieces of Titanic forever. The beautiful propellers in the back are made of bronze. They will be there. The telemotor gears, they'll be there. But someday, unfortunately, the Titanic will be a big orange stain on the bottom of the Atlantic.
To protect the wreck, England, Canada, France, and the US have entered into an agreement to regulate artifact retrieval and prevent destructive exploration.
In effect, the Titanic is a time capsule of what went on, both the rich and the poor on the Titanic, how they lived, how the ship was constructed. All of that is very important for future generations.
The debris field remains largely undocumented. Perhaps other clues await future expeditions.
And I'm wondering how that fits into your compression.
And debate will surely continue about the meaning of the double-bottom pieces identified on this expedition.
Even if it was, it didn't need to be.
And Roger Long's theory of the breakup. Today, the White Star Pier in New York, where Titanic would have arrived, is still there. The ghostly echo of the past.
You and I are certainly very fortunate that the double-bottom hull sections we documented turned out to be so important.
Well, and Roger had the insight to draw the conclusions that he did, which of course impact the timeline, the breakup of the hull, and what it was like for those people in Titanic's last moments.
No, that's right, and the experts are going to continue to study the evidence.
This is an event that happened in the dark 93 years ago. So no one is ever going to be completely satisfied. Nothing is ever going to be 100% proven. But I think we've come a long, long way towards understanding it.
Even as the wreck disintegrates, the story of Titanic retains its hold on our imaginations, speaking to the worst and best in our nature. The tendency toward arrogance, the capacity for selflessness and grace under pressure. Something about this ship refuses to fade. Regardless of what new evidence is found or discoveries made, however much we learn about that night, it seems there will always be more we wish we could know about Titanic.